Sorry there, Robin. You need to meet yourself. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Digo. And welcome everybody to this closing event of the Collective Trauma Summit, Living into the Healing Movement. My name is Robin Alfred, one of the summit hosts, and we're going to spend our evening together as a panel and doing some different practices to help us close and integrate the wonderful experience I think we've all been having for the last 9 days of our Collective Trauma Summit. And I'd love to start by welcoming Kim Rosen to share with us some poetry, which has also been a delight to be weaving poetry through the summit. And over to you, Kim, to start our session today.
Thank you so much, Robin. It has been an honor to speak poems at each of the live events here. Today, I offer 2 poems at the threshold of this closing ceremony as prayers to invite us to drop below the surface of thought into the deep longings and visions that bring us all together. The first poem is by D.H. Lawrence, called The Song of the Man Who Has Come Through, and the other is by A.S.J. Tessamond. It's called Daydream. The music is by Jami Sieber, and it is appropriately called Benediction. Not I, but the wind that blows through me. A fine wind is blowing the new direction of time. Not I, but the wind that blows through me. A fine wind is blowing the new direction of time. If only I let it bear me, carry me. If only it carry me. If only I am sensitive, subtle, oh, delicate. A winged gift. If only, most lovely of all, I yield myself and am borrowed by that fine, fine wind that takes its course through the chaos of the world, like a fine and exquisite chisel, a wedge blade inserted. If only I am keen and hard, like the sheer tip of a wedge driven by invisible blows, the rock will split. We shall come at the wonder. We shall find the Hesperides. Oh, for the wonder that bubbles into my soul. I should be a good fountain, would be a good wellhead, would blur no whisper, would spoil no expression. What is the knocking? What is the knocking on the door in the night? It is someone wants to do us harm. No, no, it is the three strange angels. Admit them, admit them. If only most lovely of all, I yield myself and am borrowed by that fine, fine wind that takes its course through the chaos of the world. One day, people will touch and talk perhaps easily, and loving be natural as breathing and warm as sunlight. And people will untie themselves as string is unknotted, unfold and yawn and stretch and spread their fingers, unfurl, uncurl, like seaweed returned to the sea. And work will be simple and swift, like a seagull flying. And play will be casual and quiet, like a seagull settling. And all the clocks will stop. And no one will wonder or care or notice. And people will smile without reason, even in winter, even in the rain. And people will untie themselves as string is unknotted, uncurl, unfurl, like seaweed returned to the sea. If only I am sensitive, subtle, oh, delicate, a winged gift. If only most lovely of all, I yield myself and am borrowed by that fine, fine wind that takes its course through the chaos of the world. Thank you. A poem by D.H. Lawrence called Song of a Man Who Has Come Through. A poem by A.S.J. Tessamond called Daydream. Music is Benediction by Jami Sieber. And now it's my pleasure to leave you with some words from Rumi. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. I'm pleased to welcome the host of this collective trauma summit, Thomas Hübl.
Hello, thank you, Kim. And everyone, welcome from my side. I'm happy we're here. I always find that after all the summit days, it's great to also have a space to conclude, to contemplate a bit the summit, and also maybe later on after our summit, kind of conversation that we will have here with a few of the hosts. I will maybe speak a little bit to the vision of next steps. Where are we going? What are the next steps in our work or in the collective trauma work in general in the world that we can see? And so that's what we come to later. And there will be also a little bit of a time for reflection and where you see yourself as part of this healing movement, some kind of reflection. And now we want to transition to a kind of panel conversation here with some of the hosts. So maybe I want to invite Robin and Laura and Ruby to
And just before we do that, and I know you're having exciting day, Thomas, getting to your location, so there's a little delay. So we haven't had a chance to hear you just yet. And if you could raise your volume a little bit, it's just coming a little low.
Okay, is that better?
Just a little bit more.
More like that.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so now it should be better. Okay, so Robin, Laura, and Ruby, first of all, welcome. I said it already in the intro to when we were with Angel, so that it's lovely to have a team here, and we can share our own experiences, and we can also see how it feels now that we put so much energy into the summit creation, and everyone was really into all these conversations with a lot of preparation, with a lot of love, with a lot of deepening our understanding also for those speakers bring into the summit. I also want to say again that we take this summit very seriously. This goes on for 8 or more months, the preparation. There's a very kind of precise curation, and we really look into all the streams of work that come together, and so everyone here is part of that love and also that kind of motivation and commitment. I want to say that again, and we're having a really good collaboration here, a deep learning, and everybody brings their full self into this summit, every host, also the ones that are not here now. But yeah, so first of all, welcome everybody. And so let's see how do you see now after the summit? As I said in the intro event already, we have, on the one hand, we wanted to get the word out about collective trauma 5 years ago. I think we did that successfully. And now we are looking, okay, how can we create a global movement? What's part of the global movement? What steps do we need to take? How can we all be engaged? It's a collective composition. It's a collective endeavor. And we need to embark together, learn to collaborate, learn to heal the traumas between us that kind of impair global collaboration, and resource each other to hold each other when we go through this work. And so maybe everybody can chime in, and maybe I hand it over to Ruby first, and you can then pass it on to somebody, or somebody else can chime in. How do you look at the next steps? How do you look at your learning, and maybe also through listening now to more talks, your own deepening of your own understanding of collective trauma integration, the work that's needed, steps that are needed. So please, Ruby, I pass it on to you.
Yes, sounds good. And again, thank you for having me. Always wonderful to be here. So I'll start with some of my themes, and then how some of the talks landed. And people heard me talk about some of my interviews, but I'll talk about some of the other talks, and then kind of the motivation and inspiration. We talked a lot about that last time for kind of next steps. So one of the themes that really came across to me was a theme around loneliness and the importance of community as a space to heal. Alok and their interview talked about how you can save a life with a smile. when they said that, I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And even in my own life, sometimes when I'm at getting food or other things and you're tired and you just want to grab your food and go, and I'm like, oh, thank you, and try to smile, and then you can just kind of see the person's energy change. So I thought that was really powerful. And I'll talk some about like how do we create community and healing spaces. And then also the impact of unprocessed grief on relationships and health, especially from childhood. And then also naming threats. Different groups, different people with different identities have different threats, and it's important to name them. And then also the cost. And sometimes there may be new language that's needed around that, right, as we try to dismantle some systems. So I'll just kind of talk about Alok, who talked about kind of unprocessing grief, and then also shape shifting that they do to diminish their self, so society won't hurt them. And then talked about how the question was, how can I change? How can I try to conform, especially around gender norms? And then shifted the question. So again, talk about change of language, shifted the question to, why is society hurting me, right? Why won't society let me be who I am? And then talked about part of the answer is that the people that are doing it are not free themselves. And then that's why they're engaging in the harm. And then also, again, this idea, a lot of times we hear as humans, right, we've evolved, we're not kind of in the wild and being chased by lions, but they talked about how in a lot of ways, different groups are threatened, right, especially around gender norms or race or other things, and how it's important to understand, again, that cost on the body. And this I found really inspirational, that they said the solution is present, and that sometimes it just needs to be developed more. So even in my own life, as I'm like, oh my gosh, right, the problems are huge, they're enormous, money's needed, this is needed, people's attitude, right, oppression needs to change, and then thinking that the solution is there, right? How do you see it? What's the insight? And then how do you develop it more? And so Thomas, in the panel, right, we were talking about how many people have signed up for this, and what does it mean to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people signed up and come to this for a reason, right, around healing, around addressing trauma. And then, so what solutions are there that can be pulled up? And then I'll just say a few more things. And then Chelsea Handler, and then Shelley Tagelski, right? They were talking about their childhood trauma and kind of the cost that it took on relationships, but then how, and even Shelley talked about an autoimmune disease that she had that left her blind. And again, really understanding the cost, right, of the oppression, of the trauma, and often that it starts from childhood. And so how can we teach the children, right, which I love, and the young people, how to be healers, how to understand it? And so part of the inspiration for me is to think about scaling up in health classes, right? When we learn about our bodies and how our bodies change, what would it mean to have information about adverse childhood experiences and the trauma, but then also the resilience and how community can be helpful. And then I think I'll stop there, and I can come back to some other things as the panel goes on.
Well, great. Maybe Laura, you want to continue? Okay.
Yes, and I'd be happy to jump in. And thanks again. And it's also an honor always to be part of this, and a joy. And on my end, again, I'm also going to weave a bit of the interviews that I did, but also connecting it to broader themes that I see were present. One of them was the role of art in enabling the expression of things that are so tremendously painful that we need some kind of mediation to be able to look at them, and thinking a bit of your teachings, Thomas, how, you speak of the experience of 2D, when you're so immersed in the experience, there's no space, you cannot see it. You are being the experience. So you are the trauma and you feel like you're the same thing. And then there's this movement where you can start to see that. You start to see that you can start to relate. So there is like an unfolding of space that needs to happen. And to me, art is such a powerful enabler of that, in this expression, thinking of as a linguist of the origins of the word expression. Ex means, one of the meanings is towards the outside, like exit. And presence, like the things that are pressing inside of you that come out when you express yourself. So then in that movement, something really powerful happens that allows us to start to bring more order into what happens. Natasha Trethaway mentions that in her talk, how writing enabled her to do that. And I saw that in the interview I did with Miguel Salazar and Ciro Galindo, where, the tremendous pain that Ciro has experienced in his life, as he and Miguel created this film and then shared it with others, not just being able to see, what happened, being able to witness one's own story, but also being able to share that in a way that allowed for others to witness together. And, and then Ciro receiving all these expressions from people about how it touched them to hear his story. Some people even saying to him, I'm sorry, I did not know this. So I feel that art has a tremendously valuable role to play there, and this piece around bringing order that Flavia Valgiusti speaks of law as an ordering principle, and how law has a role to play in the healing of trauma, precisely because it helps create, it brings back a harmony that is lost when there is injustice. And so, that's another aspect I feel that is, very, very important for us to consider. This piece of order connected to law, connected to harmony. And so there's like a force that can help bring that kind of healing to the field that has to do with those things. Then picking up on something that Ruby was saying that has to do with, teaching young people and the importance of taking care of the following generations. I spoke with Jerry Tello, and one of the things that he mentioned, inside of his cultural healing work that he does is, his work with younger children and families, and really helping them reconnect to their cultural roots. As colonialism, one of the big impacts is making us feel like our roots are wrong or bad or unworthy. And so really kind of being able to have context that help us tune back into those, the depth of wisdom that is held, particularly by indigenous communities, and how that can help create a new experience for the upcoming generations of really being able to own and deeply connect to our roots, and particularly to our connection to nature. Tiokasin Ghost Horse speaks beautifully about, like I heard him in a very reverent relation to nature, nature as the weave from where our own intelligence comes. And so I also feel there's this topic of the wisdom of indigenous communities and other collectives like Black communities being brought more into the mainstream, and it's a movement that is, there's resistance, there's, it's going to take something, but I hear kind of more interest, more curiosity in us about this. And I celebrate that. I feel that is truly, truly beautiful. And there's more things, but I'd love to hear also from you, Robin, and I can chime in again later in our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Laura and Ruby. And I'd like to also echo what a privilege and an honor it is to be a co-host of this amazing summit and to also interview some people. And one of the things that I was also noticing in myself, and I in a way want to bring it as a possible practice, is to notice who are the people and the places and the institutions that I put far away from me? Because in doing that, I start to create more of the fragmentation that we're wanting to heal in trauma integration work. So if the title of our summit is Living into a Healing Movement, then one of the things that I want to do is notice who are the people that I put far away from me. And I may put them far away because I feel like they're wrong or they're doing things that are destructive. Like in the interview I did with Dr. Peter Kalmus, he was talking about the fossil fuel industry and the lack of political leadership. And then we had an interesting conversation about fragmentation, how we don't want to fragment the field further, even as we talk about the people who are maybe some of the people we identify as causes of the problem. But I was also very struck by the people that I put far away from me because I just don't know about them. I feel that they're the kind of unsung heroes. And one of the things that I really valued a lot in the summit was getting a little bit of a window into some lives that I know nothing about. So when you interviewed Thomas Bob Delaney, who's a New Jersey former undercover police agent, I have no idea about that world. What is that world like? I just kind of read it in the newspaper, oh, undercover agents have stopped this piece of organized crime. But then when he spoke, I thought, wow, this is what it really means. It means you live a lie. It means you are wary about relationships because the relationships that you're used to building are built on deceit. It means you're kissing the cheeks of the mafia boss one moment and then going out into the street and feeling like you can't stand yourself because of what you just did. It means waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and going into the shower and with a gun and peering around the shower curtain in case somebody's out to get you. And the trauma that creates in the person who's doing that, and then the process of unraveling that trauma that he's been going through. And now, of course, he teaches about that, the value of relationship, the value of witnessing, the value of coming to be in community, and in engineering what he called carefrontations, which I thought was a very beautiful phrase. Like, we confront our trauma because we care, and we confront our trauma with care. So we want to engineer carefrontations. So I love that as a phrase to walk with, but I also felt like, wow, I really got an insight into a world that I don't know anything about. And that's another way in which I look away because I just don't know about it. But to start to own the part of me, like when you often said this before, Thomas, when people go to war, when soldiers go to war, I also go to war if they're representing my country. So when an undercover agent operates like that and he's representing that in my country, I also do that. And then I want to know about it. And I want to have compassion for the people who are doing that for me, because they're doing it for me and with me and by me. And at one point he said, those who have served see what the rest of the world does not. And I thought, yeah, that's a practice, is to start to see what I don't really see because I'm not in that line of service. So that was one thing. And then I was very struck by the enormous number of practices that were introduced during the summit. I was listening into the interview, Ruby, that you did with Julian Brave Noisecat, who has borne witness to the terrible treatment of indigenous American children in boarding schools, residential boarding schools in Canada and the United States, and the discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves of the children who died in those so-called schools. And looking at his practice of working with the trauma that he witnesses, and of course that he also feels, through so many different modalities, through ceremony and through ritual and through calling in the spirit that gets dispersed through trauma, and through body work and through dance and through creating joyful movement in his being, like many different practices. And Ruby, you also talked with him about combining just the joy of dance with the wisdom of neuroscience that tells us what kind of movements are also helpful to integrate trauma. And then I'm listening to Gabor Mate talk about compassionate inquiry, and then I'm listening to somebody else talk about journaling or the value of therapy. And I thought there's so many different modalities. But one of the things that we might want to look at if we're living into a healing movement is, what is the practice, what are the processes that speak to me? And to go deeply into those. What do they speak to me, to my people, to my culture, to my team, to my organization? To go deeply into those, rather than kind of dip a little bit into lots of shallow wells, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And then I never really get to the the water at the depth of the well, which I have to drill down through to get through the layers of rock and resistance and to find the water there. So to identify what is really the practice for me and for my culture and for my people, because there's so many practices that we're blessed with and that the summit also introduces us to. So just want to also invite that as a possibility. And maybe the last thing I would just say now is that I was very struck by the interview that you did, Thomas, actually with Rabbi Dr. Tirtz de Firestone, who's a Jewish mystic and has done a lot of work around intergenerational trauma. And at different times in previous summits, we've also talked about how epigenetic transfer is the way that intergenerational trauma is passed from one generation to another, to another, to another. And then she said, yes, that's true. And through awareness, we can reverse that. And I just felt that was a really beautiful, how she expressed that was also very beautiful. Through building awareness, we can reverse this seemingly inevitable transfer of trauma from one generation to another. And the building of awareness, which I think is a lot about what this summit focuses on, in itself is a healing movement. So the more aware we are, and the more we look towards, and the more we feel what we look towards, the more we integrate what we're focusing on. So some initial thoughts of mine also. I'd love to hear, Thomas, what was inspiring and insightful for you also.
Yeah, thank you. Listening to you right now was inspiring because and to all of you, but it's very lovely to feel how, like, when we do many of these conversations and interviews and we tune in deeply, we also become like a bit of a concentrated liquid of those conversations, and then how that kind of alchemizes with our own intelligence and with our own view and gifts and whatever capacities, and then it creates like a very concentrated output again. And now when I listen to the three of you, I feel, oh, I'm listening to something that has been concentrated and distilled in a way. Of course, there's much more to it that we cannot share here, but even in concentrating some of what touched you, when I listen to that, then I feel inspired, and I feel also like that it enriches me listening to you. And I want to also share that, because often we might look at these things as knowledge. And knowledge, of course, is very important, but it's also important that all the other dimensions of relationship that are going on when you share, and I listen to the joy in my body, I listen to the resonance in my body and how it sparks my own internal creativity and inspiration. Just by listening to what inspired you, it inspires my inspiration. And the congruency of that internal external experience, I think, is a very important part of what we are talking here about. And so that inside and outside become more congruent, we feel more intimate. And then it relates to two things that I want to pick up just because you said them. One that you said, Robin, is that there are many things happening in our environment or our culture or our society that we are not even aware of. And then one might say, of course, how can you know all of this stuff? And I would say, let's pause for a moment. Maybe we are so used to the fragmentation and the polarization that trauma and collective trauma produces in our society that we lost a bit the sense that we are all plugged into a massive supercomputer. And the question is if that supercomputer really doesn't know all of that, or it's just too fragmented that these pieces don't fully connect. And also the biosphere in itself has many precious feedback mechanisms of regulating itself, like our body. And we all know what happens when our body doesn't regulate itself well in hormone systems, in nutrients and blood flows and all kinds of stuff. And so that dysregulated quality is also an aspect of not knowing certain things that are happening in our culture, that it's not just a matter of information and studying, it's that plus many more things. And that also relates to what you said, Ruby, because when you said that, I said, yeah, that's a beautiful way to say that. It's like that when there seems to be a problem, the solution is always already in the ecosystem present. We often don't recognize it, and we often don't develop it. But it's present in it. The seed of the solution is where the challenge is. We often not connected to that solution, and that's why often the filters of traumatization don't allow us to see that. And so I think that's when you speak about this lack of flow of data, that more and more we also envision ourselves, because it relates to very much to I am part of an ecosystem, or I am also that ecosystem. That's a big difference. The dualism of I'm part, am I part of nature, or am I also nature when I walk through the forest? Am I part of society, or am I also society? That's a big difference. And maybe the dualism needs to be examined as a sense of separation that goes by unnoticed often. We say, yeah, there's the planet and there are humans. Is that really so? Or is there something in the experience already present that we share for hundreds or maybe thousands of years that encoded that language based on partly traumatic experiences? And so I think that when you bring up this inspired me while I was listening to you, say, oh yeah, right. This is very beautiful. These are beautiful examples of how it's happening now as we are here. We can surface those things. And the solutions are in the conversation already pregnant. And I find this beautiful. So I wanted to, when it's about inspiration, and that of course I had many times when I spoke to the various speakers, and we were diving into like a deeper relationship, that for me it's of course all the information that we share and the bodies of work that are brilliant and that are very deep. But it's also the relationship that makes all of that immanent. It's something that's happening here between us. It's not something that's happening out there for later. And that postponing, I think, is a critical part of trauma or healing trauma, is that the cause and the effect come closer again. And it becomes more immediate, that the experience I have with you here right now is an integral part of the relationship that we have, that enables us to bring all the speakers into a relationship, and that enables us to bring more of the world into a relationship. And like this, we become a bigger data network with everybody who's listening and taking something away. And I think that principle of interdependence or interconnectedness, as Dan Siegel beautifully frames it, is very, very beautiful. So that's one of my big inspirations. And for me, the relational resonance that I felt with so many speakers, and what has been born out of that resonance for me and for the speakers and for maybe many people that listen, and I'm sure you experience something similar, that's a very precious gift. I love that moment, and I think it's deeply nourishing, and it's giving birth to something. And it also shows intimacy online. There's an intimacy being present. And so given that, I want to share later a bit more, but I want to hear more of you, how you also envision what are the next steps? Like when everything that you learned over the years, also through the speakers, and that you do in your own work. And so how do you see this evolving? How do you see, what's your vision where you look into the next steps of the evolution? First, we said brought the word out. So we created more public awareness of systemic trauma, and that it becomes more common knowledge, at least in the people that are resonant. And now what are the next steps of creating global healing, local and global healing environments, and a bigger impact to manifest that work in a more embodied form in bigger circles in the world. So if anybody wants to chime in and share your inspirations and your visions.
I'd like to go. First of all, I love that you brought back this experience of something really alive happening in the interviews. I feel that's part of the beauty of the summit. And for me, one of the things that I feel is in the future is a greater level of convergence between different fields where, you know, and I'm reminded of the conversation you had with Brian Swim at some point, a cosmologist, who spoke about how the universe loves collectives, and it keeps, you know, bringing individuals, something together to create the next layer of life, the next evolution, right? And to me, that's part of what is most exciting about this, being able to bring, for example, in my case, I'm working in the intersection of social change systems and intergenerational collective individual trauma and historical trauma, and how in the dialogue of these two fields, deeper understandings can emerge that can help us both. You know, I don't need to become an expert in systems. You know, I am a trauma specialist, and they don't have to become trauma specialists, but as we weave this understanding together through these conversations, a deeper joint understanding happens and a deeper level of collaboration becomes possible, it seems to me. So that's one of the things that I see as part of the future. I can see artists being invited more into spaces so that they can bring, you know, the beauty and the power of their work. You know, when I just see what the collaboration between, Jami Sieber and the poems that we were hearing, the music, like just, you know, how beautiful what Kim creates there, and what that does, it really, it has such an impact. So I feel that, you know, including artists more in environments that normally were not designed for that, I think might be another place where that could be going. Another aspect is, you know, this aspect of coming together with a context, not just coming together, but really being able to see the different places where people are at. You know, like you speak also, Thomas, of that precision is love. So being able to be more precise with the kinds of intervention is too big of a word, or too it feels too pushy, but you know, the kinds of activities that we engage in when we come together as a group of people, and really noticing, you know, where are people at, what do they actually need. You know, Dr. Amy Apigian spoke about how not everybody's ready to receive love. You know, and we need to build trust more so that we can actually start to gently integrate that which keep us from doing that. And yet there's other people who are very ready to receive love. So they would need a very different kind of activity of what do we do together to heal. So those are some of the things that I see are in the future of this healing movement.
And go ahead, Robin, I'll go after you.
I can go. Yeah, I like what you say, Laura. I also support all of those movements, and maybe just a couple of things to add into the mix. One thing that I feel is the need to kind of expand the circles, and this is a little bit what you're saying also, I think, but maybe in different words, the need to expand the circles of the people who we know and interact with. So I tend to have a kind of limited circle, and then I feel like, oh, there's lots of other people doing lots of other things, but maybe I can kind of seek them out a bit. Or if I read a line in the newspaper that says, you know, a firefighter did this, that I don't go, oh, what is it to be a firefighter? What does that really mean? Well, you go into flaming buildings and you risk your life and you save, you know, and to become curious and in a way widen the circles of compassion that I feel. So it's not just kind of me, my family, my community, but also the people who I might otherwise hold far away from me, and feel like, can I become more and more curious about people, places, organizations that are doing things I know nothing about, because that's where I will grow, but also then my capacity to radiate care and compassion and to feel this kind of more of a unified field also grows. So I'm very interested in that. And as part of that, and I know that you, Thomas, and Kosha, as the CEO of the Pocket Project, had one of the sessions in the summit on global social witnessing. But I feel like that's a real core practice now. And global social witnessing means being exposed to different pieces of information or news, for example, and noticing how it lands in my body, heart, mind. So where do I get overwhelmed? Where do I become numb? Where can I host it? And I think one of the movements that we want to support and encourage and enable is to expand how much I can host. So that without forcing it, but I can just gently notice my edges and see, oh, can I soften those edges and host a little bit more? Can I feel a little bit more of the world in me? Because the more I can do that, the more I become a healing vessel, because there's more world that I can hold. So I feel like those are some of the movements, and they're related, of course, like basically widening this vessel so it can host more. And that means more difference, more other, more people that I hold far away, and noticing, not pushing myself into that place, but noticing where I stay a little bit small and in my comfort zone, and where I can go, oh, I can just breathe a bit more into this. And then next year I breathe a bit more into this. And then the year after I breathe a bit more into this. And little by little, I become a much larger resonance body in myself and become a bigger vessel for healing. And of course, the more we do that collectively, the more powerful that is too. Ruby, speak to us.
Yes, I appreciate what you said about the collective. And so for me, I really think we need a wealth transfer in this country. I'm talking about the US, and but also a knowledge transfer, right? Like, again, when I talked about how the body responds to stress, and then also resiliency and how it protects, how it can protect against that, right? That's knowledge that literally can save people's lives. It can save their mental well-being. And how do we, as a society, a global society even, think about that knowledge transfer? And so, again, I appreciate what Laura said about cultural wisdom, right? What people have used for thousands of years to survive. And I talk about myself, right? The reason I'm here in this space, able to talk, right, is because of the cultural wisdom of my ancestors and the coping mechanisms that they used. And so how do we kind of bring those to the forefront, but then also add the new information about neuroscience and technology, right? How do we integrate that to literally, can we wipe away the health disparities, right? Can we wipe away this idea that as a country or even as a global society that we can't house everyone, right? Or as a global society that we have to police gender norms and other things. So I think about this knowledge transfer, and again, kind of this changing of language from a scarcity to abundance, right? And when I work with youth, I talk about all of you have gifts and genius. I know in our society, we try to say that there are certain people, right, who are gifted, who are the geniuses, but everyone has it. And so I'm really trying to think about that. And then also, Robin, I appreciate what you said about different healing modalities, right? There are many. And how can people choose the ones that feel good to them? So again, we're doing a documentary on mothers who've lost children to gun violence, and also creating a music album, but then also want to create dance. And so how do we incorporate what we know from neuroscience into the dance? So even as people are moving and having a good time and sharing with others, that there's also some healing that happens. When I was being trained for doing emotional emancipation circles, again, Dr. Cheryl Grills and Enola Aird started it. We taught people about the butterfly hug, right? Like kind of like this bilateral movement. And then we asked them, so what does it feel like? What does it remind you of? And some said, right, when babies are upset, and you know how you pat them to try to help them calm down and regulate their nervous systems, right? And so we have our group do it, and we talk about it, and that's part of the feedback, right? So you learn something, and then people use it, and does it help, right? For some people, yes, and for some people, no. But then for those who help, right, that's another tool in their wellness kit. So the last thing I'll talk about that we're doing, and again, with funding from the MacArthur Foundation, we talk about this project, right, creating a third Reconstruction. Angel talked about Reverend Barbara, who has the book Third Reconstruction, and focus like on political awareness and voting. And when I think about it, I'm also thinking about health and wellness, and again, this knowledge transfer and also economic transfer. I haven't left that part out either. And so thinking about a wellness store that has wellness tools that are at people's fingertips, and they're created by the people who are experiencing it. So in our case, the young people that we work with over the summer, the high school students, created many of the wellness tools. And so even now, we have a design class at the University of Illinois of engineer and other design students who are going to take some of their ideas and then literally translate them into wellness tools that can be accessible and available to everyone. And again, it's coming from the young people, and it's coming from their cultural background. And then also we'll have the neuroscience and the latest information as part of that. So, and the talks that I heard, and it was so amazing to listen to them. It's good to see that we're thinking similar things. We're thinking about healing on the communal level, right? The individual level, and what happened with our ancestors that also could be addressed. So those are the things I'm excited about.
That's beautiful. I have before we transition to the next part of the call, where we also maybe I'll introduce a little bit of my future vision, and then maybe give everybody a little time to reflect, okay, about yours, and maybe what you take away as all the listeners of the summit, what we can take away and be part of, like a global healing movement in our sphere of influence, wherever that is. But before we do this, maybe to all of you, 2 questions. What makes you most hopeful at the moment? Also, given all the things that you heard from the summits and how this alchemizes with your own understanding, wisdom. And what's the next step for you? Either personally or professionally? If you speak a little bit, okay, when we talk about the next step of the healing, so it's okay, we can talk about that. But what's that more concretely for every one of us as a role modeling? So because it's very easy to get very overwhelmed by the impact of seeing so much trauma in the world. So much trauma happens as we speak here, through racism, anti-Semitism, through the wars that are happening all over, through famine, inequality, through the after effects of colonialism, through gender violence, like there's, you name it, there's so many. And even if I name it, one could say, wow, it's so heavy. It's like just depressing. It's like, let's not talk about it. Let's do something else. So like, let's get over with that and let's package it. But out of some reason, we are all aware that these things happen right now. And I think we, in one way or the other, and some of it we have done together, we give ourselves to the level of pain that is in the world. And I know some of you were there, like we when we look deeper at deeper collective trauma layers in given areas in the world, we accessed those. It's not just like intellectually or kind of from a distance. It's like we are in it when we do these processes. We give ourselves to the experience, and that's transformational. And so we are aware of it. And at the same time, when I listen to you, I hear excitement, I hear motivation, I hear something uplifting. I feel uplifted when you speak. So there must be something that makes you hopeful, that gives you resource, that lets you continue and say, we have to do this, and this is a vocation, and we do this in different ways, all of us, and there are millions of other ways to do this. And And now I want to, that's why I'm asking the question, and that maybe also is for everybody who's listening to us right now. Yes, I can just be distant and indifferent, or I can let myself be touched, but I don't have to drown in it. I can still have my motivation to keep going and see what's my contribution. So what makes you hopeful? What's your next step? And then we will transition to the next phase.
Maybe we go in a different order this time. So what makes me hopeful is a deeper understanding of what I'm hoping for. So I'm not hoping, of course, on some level, I want an end of suffering and an end of trauma, but I'm not really hoping for that. What I'm hoping for is that people find the part that they are meant to play in the orchestra of life. And I feel hopeful that more and more people are asking that question, like, what's my purpose? What's my contribution? And I also feel happy that I feel like I'm doing work that supports that. So that also makes me hopeful, because I encounter a lot of people who are in that. But I think for me, it's been very helpful to unpack what I'm really hoping for. I'm not hoping for an end to something. I'm hoping for a movement, and to support a movement where people feel they know what is their part to play. And I was very touched, again, Rabbi Firestone, she said, it's not so much about hope. She talked about faith in possibility. And that I find a beautiful phrase, like, and I have faith in possibility. And that's maybe a different framing around hope. And what am I personally committed to doing? One is, in a way, doing what I referred to earlier, like becoming more curious when I read something or when something comes to my attention, being more curious about the parts of that I don't know about. Like drilling deeper in, when it says, yeah, there's X thousand Ukrainian refugees, what does that really mean? You know, what does a refugee experience really feel like? So becoming more curious about labels and terms that might feel like they package something neatly, but actually within that, there's a lot of visceral experience that I want to know more about. So that's one practice that I want to continue and deepen. And the other is around my own creativity. I feel like I spend a lot of time talking about things and coaching people and supporting people and running programs. But actually, I love to write poetry, and I love to paint, and I love to dance. And those are also ways of both integrating things in myself and maybe new insights dawn in those processes. I feel more renewed energy and commitment to the joy of indulging and embracing my own creativity.
Love it. So Robin and I wrote a poem. You all heard me talk about it at the opening. We wrote a poem together. So I guess another poem is in our future, Robin and I hear. So for me, I would say when I hear the word hope, I think about Maya Angelou's poem in the line that says, "I am the dream and the hope of the slave," right? Like those who were in this country as enslaved humans who people tried to, they couldn't do it, right? They tried to strip away their humanity, and they were able to see into the future and to take steps and to create systems that would transform their condition and the condition of those generations to come. So when I hear the word hope, I think about all of that. And so as part of it, you're right, Thomas, that we do immerse ourselves into every day get up and to kind of look at the ugliness of humanity. Even when I do my gun violence research and kind of when I have to go and present and I go and look at the new numbers and all that, like it just breaks my heart. And so at some point I was like, okay, I think some of the tools that I develop, I need them myself, right? So one of the tools is a Joy, Happy, Hope campaign that we're developing. And as part of like I said, the documentary, we're doing an album and we're creating songs that both talk about the pain and the sorrow and the grief, but then also the hope and the resiliency. So that's one. And I think the other thing that really makes me hopeful are young people. When I work with them this summer, again, I talk about like, they're complex, right? We're all complex. And so on one hand, they did have a lot of grief and a lot of pain, but on the other hand, we were in this space together and they had tools to build things that they wanted to create. One person wanted to build a children's museum to train young people how to take care of children. Others around substance use. And it was so inspiring to see their creativity, to see their genius, and to be able to bring resources from the university to let that manifest, right? To give them unprecedented access to some of the answers that could literally change their lives, change their mother lives, right? Their sibling lives and those generations to come. So I think that really make me hopeful. And I just learned so much, and I love their energy. So that's really good. And then I think the thing that I'm really trying, two things. I need to get quiet, right? My life is very busy, lots of meetings, and I need to get quiet. So that's one. And the second is wealth. So, right, I talk about changing our language, that there's abundance. I look at poverty, and I look at the cost of poverty in terms of not having housing, and how do you shift that? So literally now we're building affordable housing, trying to make it at about 20,000 for a home, and then also, again, packing it with technology and healing aspects of it. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. Oh, one more thing. Last year, I said that I applied for the Poet Laureate of Urbana. I didn't get it, but they encouraged me to apply again this year. So that's another thing that I'll do in my quiet time.
That's beautiful, Ruby, and I love the feeling I get as I tune into you. And that's I love the questions, Thomas. Thank you for the opportunity of reflecting on this. I was very touched to hear about, we are the dreams of our ancestors, and how that, really, I could really feel the hope in that, and how touching that is. What else makes me hopeful? Well, one thing is, participation. When people get engaged, and, they kind of start to own the actions that create the movement in their lives, and seeing the difference that makes me hopeful when I participate in that. The normalizing and mainstreaming of trauma, seeing, for example, Alanis Morissette here, speaking about this so openly. It's like, oh, it so touched my heart. And it's like, oh my God, how many more leaders have gone through things that are similar to this? If everybody who has got a leadership position would be willing to share about their struggles, I think so many more people would feel legitimized to touch their own wounds and to share them, that I think that could make a really big difference. But seeing that it's already happening is very touching, and that gives me a lot of hope. One more thing is from another of the trauma summits, Hector Aristizabal mentioning that the medicine is in the wound, this whole discourse around that. When we come deeper into this place, there is a grace, there is just this, the sacred dimension of what we're doing. That part always deeply touches me, and how in this embracing of our own vulnerability, hearing Ohad Naharim, sorry if I can pronounce that properly, speak of the wound as a teacher also, and how he gets stronger, not because he's kind of forcing his body, but because he finds a more refined way of moving that is more elegant, more efficient, more effective, relating to our challenges that way. I feel it also gives me hope. Now, in terms of myself, I loved hearing about you dancing, Robin. We should do that sometime with Kosha. And I love dancing. That's one of the things that most gives me joy, and that I think also most helps me heal. Sometimes when I'm really in an intense moment of distress, I can dance that off, and that makes such a difference for me. And in terms of my professional, the movements in my professional life, connecting much more deeply to nature, connecting much more deeply to the healing from colonialism workshops that I do, where I feel that's where I have the most to offer. That's one of the directions. And then with the Collective Change Lab and my very dear colleagues there, we're preparing some webinars on the intersection of systems change and trauma. And we're also going to be doing some research on collective healing, the different modalities and who do they serve, so that we can get a much better understanding of that field and see how can we help bring that into a deeper resonance in other spaces that might not have been designed for healing, but might be interested and ready to take in practices that can truly help scale our capacity for transformation and healing. So that's on my end. Over to you, Thomas.
Oh, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for this beautiful conversation, and we can feel like the spirit of the summit, because I feel the summit is also working through us. I believe deeply that projects, companies, organizations, NGOs, whatsoever, they are becoming manifest through us, and we either give ourselves to the manifestation or we resist it, and we feel the pressure that that creates. And I feel that when we speak, there's a lot of inspiration, there's a lot of passion, love, and willingness to find out more. And I think that's beautiful. I can feel this here, and I think it enlivens us a lot. So thank you. And thank you for the love and the passion that you put into the summit. It's a joy to do this together, and hopefully we are doing this for a long time together, and it will be the same fun as it is now. And so thank you for your contribution. It's very much appreciated, and it makes the summit to what it is. So I can feel all your love in that. And maybe I add a few things to what you already shared. I want to come back for a moment to that we are the dreams of the former generations. But we are also the ground of the next generations. So we are also dreaming the next generations. And I think when we talk about the future of collective trauma healing, it comes with the more we de-ice. Let's imagine collective trauma is like a permafrost in the ground in the winter. And as that permafrost starts to melt, it gives space to a lot of information, energy, data that's being released. And I believe when we open more and more of the frozenness of our societies and our cultures, we also begin to feel more. We begin to tap into that data network more that I was speaking about, that life is an alive data network. And Dan Siegel also spoke beautifully about the intraconnectedness, that we are intraconnected with everything. We're not separate looking at it only. And that concerns the vertical development. So we are de-icing also verticality, which means more awareness of our ancestors and ancestries, as in beautifully in many indigenous cultures and healing modalities. It's very alive and kept alive, and it has been hurt or degraded to a certain extent through colonialism. But in decolonizing our world, we actually come back to notice the beauty that has been kept alive and the power of the healing that has. So ancestral healing is an integral part of de-icing our world, and that ancestors are actually an alive data flow in us. That's not just intellectual knowledge about the history. And I think that's important, but it's also important that we see that there is a communication with the next generations, and especially in this time when climate change is so imminent, when a lot of the future for the next generation is at stake, it's even more important for us to be aware how the future is already talking to us, how the next generations are equally talking to us as our ancestors. So that's a communication network, and some of the numbness prevents us from accessing that data. And I think that's why we are all called to that. We are not just these people, these individuals in a hyper individualized world, but we are much more than that. And opening ourselves up to that is very important. And I think responsibility and the ability to respond what's in this world right now, 2023 on October 4th, that's that's the horizontal responsibility in my own body, to my family, to the community, society, global, whatever, universal reality. But there is also a responsibility, the ability to respond to the lives and the nature and the pain and the resilience and the beauty of our ancestors, and to the future generations. We're able to respond. And I think that's a function that is often not enough accounted for when we do the things that we do. That's important information that needs to be included, especially when we talk about sustainable living, regenerative living, creating systems and structures that are regenerative. They need to include the next generations. And how open are we to connect to the next generations and their reality? Not just as imagination, as something that's immanent. There is an immanent data flow. And so on the one hand, even if that sounds maybe expanding the way we look at reality sometimes, I think it's important that we dream bigger and that we open ourselves to new possibilities that are not always part of our reality and our life experience today. And on a more practical level, I think a few things as inspiration, or maybe that's already part of your life anyway. When we see the world today through the fact, as we are on this call, the speed of data is accelerating. So the speed of data is accelerating every minute, which means the world is becoming relatively smaller. And through the world population, but also through the data speed, the connectivity, and how we are all coming together. What was before a big world that was very far, now we are in a global village. We have access to so much data. We have access to so many life experiences. The world is shrinking relatively, given the data speed. And that means that a lot of identity structures that were relevant for a certain time are not relevant anymore, and they have to fall apart. They need to be deconstructed. And when structures get deconstructed and change, the change process is not what we resist. The trauma that's frozen around that change process is what's painful, what brings up existential fears, what makes it very hard to go through uncertainties, what for also in leadership makes it very hard to let go and be in and a part of the process without disconnecting. So there's so many ways how the uncertainty and the falling apart of identity structure needs one thing: a live, immanent relationship. What is related as a data flow between us, I feel you feeling me, cannot fall apart. Everything that's disrelated and built on compensations is very painful when it falls apart, because it seems like there is nothing else. And so that practice of ongoing, it's an ongoing practice to refine and deepen our capacity to relate, is actually what helps us to deconstruct the structures that are not necessary anymore, use that energy and substance to create new structures that are much better for us at this point of evolution than they were maybe 50, 100, or 500 years ago. So the internal neuroplasticity, when we change, can change as long as it's not iced over. When it's iced over, then change feels threatening, difficult. We prevent it, we avoid it, and we maybe resist it, not because we cannot do better, because we need a deeper understanding of the trauma dynamics that created in the first place. And another practical application, I believe, since collective trauma and collective healing is our process, it's not somebody's process, it's our global society process. And that global society process means also that, same as hospitals didn't exist at a certain point in time, and then we notice they are important for our health. I think an architecture for collective integration is a must. And I think we have to do everything that we can to support our governments, to support the society, to implement a healing architecture that will lower over a certain period of time healthcare costs, healthcare issues, criminal rates, racism, anti-Semitism, many, many, many other social difficulties that we are grappling with. So that architecture doesn't exist. It needs to be put in place. And every one of us can be a part of putting that in place in order to, that as citizens, as a citizen, I have the responsibility to take care of the legacy that I have been born into. And I think if billions of people do that, we have a tremendous power to outgrow the pain of the past, to disarm the repetition compulsion of trauma, and to open up the world for the next generations to be a bigger world with more possibility, more open energy, more creativity than the one we found. And I think if we talk about purpose, it's about what we contribute to the world, and it's also what we heal that seems to be difficult for us. That's equally our purpose. And what that does, it's opening our humanity. It's not the big things out there. It's also the deep humanity in which those deep things are grounded. And I think that deepens the way we experience each other. We experience Mother Earth, we experience Spirit, and we are able to co-create a world that is a fair place, a just place, a place that every citizen on this planet perceives as a home. And since our home is hurt, we are the ones that need to heal it. There is nobody else, with the help of all the resources we have. And then there's maybe one last thing, and then we can maybe conclude this and have a short contemplation maybe. I think it's so beautiful to remember again and again. Whenever somebody cuts their finger, the body knows how to heal it if it can. And so our society is biosphere too. Our societies and this ancestral line from the past to the future is biosphere too. Inherent to our physical and mental and spiritual capacities is a self-healing mechanism that wants us to heal. Everybody that feels called to do inner work, everybody that feels called to do any kind of support of other people to heal, is part of that healing mechanism. We are all part of it. There are active expressions of it, and then there is the expression that lives in every human being and every being on the planet. There is a mechanism to heal itself, and that's a powerful ally. That's a powerful ally to connect to, and to connect to in each other, and that helps us to gain the power and the resource when sometimes it feels harder. Community, maybe spirit, community, and the self-healing mechanism of the world are the elements that help us to strengthen and resource ourselves. So it's important not to forget that life wants to heal itself. And I feel that all the contributions of all the hosts, all the whole team, everybody who tunes in with the summit is that self-healing mechanism in action. So, and thank you everybody who participated and who created the summit already for years, but this will come in a moment. So we will just take a moment of space. I think it's important sometimes to just let things drop in. And before we go to finishing our summit closure event, let's take a moment to see how these things land with you, whatever is your leading edge, whatever is your learning edge, whatever is your expression of that self-healing mechanism, whatever is your next step in life, whatever gives you hope or faith or confidence in the movement or intelligence of life. And also, how do you see yourself as a part of a global healing movement, wherever you're active, wherever is your sphere of influence? And also to feel the community that so many people tune in, are interested, contribute. Is a powerful community. And so what's the community that you contribute power to, but you also gain power from? Like, what's the community that resources you wherever you are active? And it's important to have that community aspect when we deal with our legacies, our unresolved legacies. And then before we transition to Kim to enrich our hearts with amazing poetry, just think of one thing that you are grateful for. What's your gratitude in listening to or being with in the summit ecosystem? And whatever one point that enriched you that you take away to your life. And maybe there are many, but let's just feel the gratitude for one step of learning, one insight, one nugget of growth, increase of perspective, understanding. And with that gratitude, I also want to express my gratitude for you, Kim, and for Jami Sieber, that you bring always a lot of wisdom through poetry and through the way you recite it, and Jami through beautiful music. It's always touching me. It's like music in my being. So thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you to the whole panel. That was so cohering and deeply inspiring. Thank you. I want to close this ceremony with a poem that is really a consecration for me, called Love After Love by the St. Lucian poet Derek Walcott. Again, as Thomas said, with music by Jami Sieber, a track called Returning. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself, arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to the one who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. Not I, but the wind that blows through me. A fine wind is blowing a new direction of time. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. I thank you so much. That was a poem called Love After Love by Derek Walcott, with a line from the poems that we heard earlier. And now I invite Robin to give us the closing announcements.
Wow, thank you so much, Kim. Such a beautiful poem and so beautifully recited. And thank you so much for all the poetry that you brought to the closing event and also all the way through the summit. So many, many thanks to you, Kim. And of course, huge thanks to you, Thomas, for convening this 5th summit, for inviting us to be hosts with you, and for all the inspiration that you bring through the summit and many other places, through your teachings and your being, the inspiration and the hope that you bring into our world. So many, many thanks to you, Thomas, for all that you've brought and continue to bring. And thank you, Laura, thank you, Ruby, for being here today, for bringing such wonderful conversations into the summit and our panel, and for, again, all the contributions that you've made throughout the whole summit, and of course, many other summit hosts that are not with us today, and we'll be rolling some credits in a moment to honor and appreciate all of them. And there are still many summit talks available, including all of the poet conversations, the integration practices, the music performances. If you're just finding us for the first time and have not yet signed up for the summit, you can still do that. Strange though it may seem, you can still sign up for the summit and do that by visiting our website, collectivetraumasummit.com. If you want to have full access to all of the recordings from the summit, you can purchase the Collective Trauma Healing Upgrade Package, which includes lifetime access to all of the talks, over 60 talks, in video, audio, and written form, as well as more than 30 speaker bonus gifts and a self-study course with Thomas entitled Understanding Collective Trauma. And all of that is available at a saving of 50% off during the summit. And you'll find the offer to purchase that also on the website, collectivetraumasummit.com, as well as in the emails we send. And you might be interested to know that every purchase of the upgrade package helps to cover the costs both of this event, and also a portion of the revenues are donated to our NGO partner, the Pocket Project, which is dedicated to the healing and integration of collective trauma around the world. So we really appreciate your support on many levels. So as Thomas said at the beginning, it takes a huge team, and we want to thank all of our amazing contributors, the summit speakers, the panelists, the poets, the musicians, those who guided the integration practices, our partner, the Pocket Project, and of course, a huge thank you to you for not just watching, but also feeling what you've been watching and listening to. Thank you for joining us for the Collective Trauma Summit. Thank you for your presence in this closing event. And you are very much part of the healing movement that we're living into. It's not something, again, as we spoke about in the panel, it's not something that's out there. It's something that's right here and it's imminent. And you are part of the healing movement. And thank you for your willingness and your courage to join that. Over 40 people have played a role in the last few months. So we want to extend our gratitude both to our immediate production and support team, as well as to the extended team that was formed specifically for this event. And Diego will now roll the credits as another way of extending our thanks to the team. So thank you again for your presence today, and may all the energy from this summit be a real blessing, and may it go towards contributing to the building of a healing movement for our time.